Hello and welcome to English Through Experience. I'm ET Tutor. This is a video for GCSE students preparing for their transactional writing task for GCSE English Language, Paper 2. So it's been inspired by the many comments I've seen on the internet. So lots on Twitter, lots of students very unhappy with the amount of quotes they need to learn for GCSE English Literature. So what I thought I'd do is create a task around that, something that people seem to be quite passionate about. So we can break it down, have a look at how you can approach the question, have a look at the assessment objectives, and I will talk you through what I'd be expecting to see as a GCSE English language examiner. Alright then. Right, so this time we're looking at the AQA format. I know a lot of students are interested in how the different exam boards work. Rest assured for this transactional writing that you're all being assessed in the same way. The questions are very similar, it's just they lay them out slightly differently. Okay, so for you it will be Section B, Writing. Just a side note, anytime you see transactional writing, it's your Paper 2 Section B writing. So you are advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section, writing full sentences. You are reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. So I would definitely be expecting to see a plan for this. Much better if you do it on the exam paper than doing it on a spare sheet. So just get the plan down on there, brief idea of what's going to be in your introduction, what's in your main paragraphs, what their focus will be, and what you're going to say in your conclusion. This will help you to develop your argument. Right, so let's have a look. The closed book GCSE English Literature exam is a memory test. So much time is spent learning quotes. We should be spending more time developing our critical skills. Write a letter/email to the Secretary of State for Education, Minister of Education, exploring the learning of quotations for GCSE English Literature. Right. I've put down letter/email this time, but it's unlikely it would appear like that in your exam. It hasn't done so far, but I've done this so students can practice the form of writing that you're less familiar with. So just pick letter or email, and there'll be slightly different conventions for those. But the content of the argument you put forward is going to be the same. So there's a lot going on in this statement. What I'd suggest you do in the exam is try to break it down into its individual parts. So the first part that ends with that exclamation mark seems quite angry. That's their statement overall, that it's a memory test. So that's something you'd want to address. Then in the second part we can see that it's focused on time, the amount of time that goes into learning these quotations, which I'm sure is something that most of you can recognise. And then finally we've got a more positive aspect to the statement, where it says that we should be spending more time developing our critical skills. So as an examiner, ideally I would like to see each part addressed in some way. I hope that makes sense. Then you get your list of bullet points or prompts. Now you don't have to cover this list in full, that's not what examiners are looking for, but chances are to fulfil the requirements of the question that you're going to cover some of these things naturally. So let's have a look at them now. It's always going to say something like your own experiences, and with this question it's great because this is something that you've been through or something that you're going through. And then our second one is interesting, the impact on students and teachers. Now chances are if this was the task in the exam, as an examiner I would see lots and lots of responses written from the point of view of students. So one way you can make your response stand out is by writing from the point of view of somebody else. So it could be, a teacher like they've suggested, or it could even be a parent. It could be the head of a mental health charity in this case. And then what you'd need to do is maintain that voice all the way through your response. And that would show that you've got a good understanding of tone. So it's something useful to think about. And then we've also got our next bullet point, arguments for and against the statement. It might be worthwhile at the beginning when you're planning just to create a little table with some ideas under for and against, and try to work out which ones you'd incorporate into your response. You don't have to give both sides of the argument, it's up to you how you approach it. And then the next one we've got is a bit of a bigger, wider bullet point, why we study English literature. Now obviously I'm an English tutor, I've studied English and English literature at degree level, so it's something that I feel passionately about. And if I was doing this task, I would probably focus in on that bullet point and what English literature does give us and why we study it. So I would say that something like it helps us to navigate through an increasingly complex and confusing world. That's why you're doing it in my eyes, by learning about events from the past, learning about how different characters tackle scenarios. These are all things that will help you in the future. And then you always get this little bullet point saying, as well as any other ideas you might have. And then we can see it down at the bottom that you're going to be marked for the accurate and appropriate use of vocabulary, spelling, punctuation and grammar. So in a little bit I'm going to focus in on that when we've got the assessment objectives in front of us, and that's really going to be from my point of view as an examiner, having marked these types of tasks for about 5 years. So hold on for that part, but for now we're going to take a look at some sources that might be able to help you write this response. After the first year of this exam series, somebody put together a petition to Parliament saying, change the GCSE English Literature exam from closed book to open book. And they put forward their arguments here. So it could be that some of these things help inspire you. What I am going to do with this little bit of text is respectfully just analyse it in the way I would do if I was marking it as an exam piece. So we can see they've started off putting forward their overall argument that students are struggling. And they have then gone on to say, because of this, many failed. Now, what would be great if this was a transactional writing piece is some statistics to support that statement, to make it more believable. And then we can see here that they're saying, how can they expect us to remember quotes from 15 poems, plus how to analyse them, plus remembering the whole plot, themes, characters and quotes from another book? So they've got some nice repetition in there, that repetition of the word plus, and then they've got a list. So these are definite language devices I would expect to see in most responses. They're quite straightforward ones and they've used them pretty well here, haven't they? Then they go on to get even more passionate about it, focusing really on the student's well-being, which is perhaps something that you could focus on in a paragraph in your response. So we've got, is it really fair that students have to remember so much whilst also doing revision for other exams? It is important to know how to do all that is asked in exams. That's nice, they've given some positive, then they've come in with a but. But when in life will you ever have to remember lots of information about lots of text, then be expected to recall it perfectly under pressurised conditions, on top of loads of other stresses, then write about it for strangers to judge whether or not you are worthy of a good grade or not? So towards the end there, you can see that perhaps they've got a little bit over emotional and they've started using more everyday language. So if you have a quick look at well, the whole of that paragraph really, can you pick out any more colloquial words? I would say that on top of loads of other stresses is more everyday language than the rest of their piece. So it's all about sustaining that tone throughout the piece of writing. But here we've got some nice vocabulary. That word recall is perfect in this scenario. So if I was marking this, I would definitely be commenting on that as a good vocabulary choice. So I'm guessing most of you feel a little bit like this person who's put the petition forward. I agree with a lot of what they're saying. Obviously, I am one of these strangers who judge your work, but don't think that all examiners think that what you're doing is the best way for you to learn. We're here to do our job, which is to mark the work we're given alongside those assessment objectives. We don't have any say in them. The petition's closed now. It ran for 6 months and it did receive the amount of signatures required to be put forward to Parliament. So it's 100,000 signatures. So if anybody wants to have another go, they can do, because as you can see, the petition was rejected. We've got the response from Parliament here, and I would suggest that you pause this or have a look in the description box where you'll be able to find it. There's loads of really advanced vocabulary in here, the kind of words that will really amp up your grade in the exam, and it's structured very well in terms of each paragraph has a very clear focus, and this is something that we'll be wanting from your work as well. Whether you agree with what they've said is another question. Now, in your actual response, it might be that you could come up with some ideas of your own about how to tackle it. As you can probably guess by the fact that I've made this video, I feel really passionately about it. I don't think it's a way of encouraging a lifelong love of literature. I don't think it's making the students want to engage with the text. I think it's making them feel stressed out, like that petition suggested. But in terms of a better idea, I'm struggling. I thought possibly we could have exam papers that had a quotation bank for some of the texts. So it would reduce this learning word for word that you're having to do. If you knew that, say, you go in for your Shakespeare and there's going to be a range of quotations there for you to use and copy into your responses. Some students aiming high might still want to learn their own quotations as well, but it gives a little bit more flexibility, especially for students who have exam anxiety or students who just feel that they don't perform well in exam conditions. So would love to hear your thoughts on the idea of a quotation bank. Now we come to the assessment objectives, which I know I mentioned earlier I'd focus in on. So for these transactional writing pieces and your creative writing, it's AO5 and AO6 that we're looking at. And we'll start with AO6 because that's a bit more straightforward. This is where we give you a mark for your vocabulary, your sentence structures. So therefore that's your punctuation and grammar. And we're also looking at your spelling. Now, when I mark a piece of work, very quickly I can establish which band the student's work falls into, and then I'm tweaking the mark. So I'm going, say if I've put them in band 2, I'll say, right, are they closer to band 1 or are they closer to band 3? And I will go back through and reassess the work, focusing in on a few things that make it very easy for me to justify the mark I'm giving to you. So I'll look at the words again, I'll look at the vocabulary, I'll look at the vocabulary overall within the piece, and potentially maybe able to say, right, it's definitely closer to band 3, so they're going to get a mark at the top of band 2. It might be a bit technical, but if you've got a copy of a mark scheme, it'll make more sense. So what I'm saying is vocabulary is really, really important. It's one of the reasons I always encourage my students to proofread their work, not just checking for errors, but trying to improve vocabulary. If at the last minute you cross out a few words and replace them with much more helpful words, words that communicate your meaning more clearly, then it may be that I can award marks for those changes. In terms of punctuation, that's something you can think of in your proofreading as well. So in our statement this time, the first sentence ended with that exclamation mark, which made it seem quite angry. Go through your work and see if there's an opportunity anywhere to include an exclamation mark if it's going to help enhance the meaning you're trying to communicate. Other good ones to try and incorporate are ellipsis and semicolons. Those are ones that students use less frequently, so they will make your responses stand out. Then for AO5, this is sort of the text as a whole. So what we're looking for there is really about your organisation and your ideas. So you've got something interesting to say. Hopefully there's some creativity in the way you communicate it. There's some flair. It all hinges together. And you have organised those ideas in a logical way using a range of paragraph lengths, possibly including things directly related to the form you're writing in, like bullet points, and that those features support the text. They help it hold all together. That's that last bit at the end, coherence and cohesion of texts. Just want something that all links together, it all holds together and forms an overall argument. Okay, hopefully that's helped a little bit. If you're still struggling, there's some letter writing practice where I've suggested a few more questions, and then there's videos on different language techniques that you can use. So that's where we'll go through things like statistics, adding in the opinion of an expert. So say with this one, it could be somebody a youth worker who's experienced young people coming to them really upset about the exam, that sort of thing. If you are a student who is still learning quotations, then there are 2 videos I've made that might help. So the first one's all about which ones to pick, and the second one is about how to commit them to memory. If you're a 2019 student, this part's over for you, so hopefully you're feeling quite relieved. Alright then, thank you all for watching. Would be great to get some comments. If anybody wants to send plans or snippets of their work, I will try to respond to you. If you want to hit like, that would be great. I'm guessing nobody's loving their revision videos, but it does really help indicate to other students that it's worth a watch. So if you've learned anything, please hit like so I know that I'm doing stuff that's actually helping you. Alright then, bye for now.